All right. Hey, good morning, faculty, distinguished committee members, and guests. I'm pleased to see so many of you here in attendance today. Let's go ahead and get started. My name is Miguel Moravic. I'm the Vice President of the Graduate Student Body, and today we'll be making the case that the Faculty Senate has a clear and prescribed duty to deliberate a fossil fuel divestment resolution. Let's get started with some breaking news. Last week, Al Gore endorsed fossil fuel divestment here at Vanderbilt. The former US Vice President did not shy away from weighing in on the subject, spending 10 minutes rebuking many of the administration's arguments against divestment. How did it come to this? Let's be clear, fossil fuel divestment is a high-profile issue for the entire campus community. Before we introduce the merits of our argument, let's dispel any doubts that the Faculty Senate should weigh in on this subject. In the words of Dr. Isidore Rabi, the faculty are this university. How Vanderbilt decides to proceed on this issue will largely be determined by the support of this chamber. Over the years, professors from all schools have gone on the record calling for divestment at Vanderbilt. To sample just a few of the faculty endorsements of our cause, there's Dr. Amanda Little of English, Dr. Cecilia Tichy, also from Arts and Sciences. There's Dr. Lori Troxel from Engineering, seen here actually winning the Chancellor's Cup. And from the medical school, there's Dr. Curtis Basinger. I want to pause here and ask the distinguished guests assembled. When is the last time you've seen any faculty member, let alone a senior one, shoulder to shoulder with student activists protesting Vanderbilt itself? The significance of faculty joining students in protest cannot be understated towards the importance of why the Senate must weigh in. More than a few individuals here and there, the divestment campaign has achieved a critical mass of faculty support. 2 weeks ago, the Vanderbilt AAUP chapter, which represents over 40 faculty and instructors, formally endorsed the campaign. Even the Chancellor acknowledges the faculty's unique role in leading this discussion, charging professors and students to debate the merits of divestment. Well, the students have weighed in, passing unanimous and supermajority resolutions, and the undergraduate and graduate students respectively. The community has weighed in, completing polls and signing a petition that now has amassed over 1,500 signatures. And indeed, the guiding principles of the Senate demand action as a deliberative body to protect the well-being of students. It is this committee that is charged with reviewing student grievances. It is also this committee that we presented to almost a year ago today and were promised meaningful action on the subject. We cannot delay further. Just as your peers across the country have answered the call and waited on divestment, the faculty of Vanderbilt too have a clear and prescribed duty to weigh in on this topic of immense community interest and concern. Up next, Will Colburn is going to lay out the crux of our argument for divestment. Will?
Hello, faculty. My name is Will Colburn, and I'm a member of VSG Environmental Affairs. Vanderbilt University is truly a special place. Please take a second and think to yourself, why is this? What makes Vanderbilt so valuable? We owe it to three things. Number one, our reputation. Vanderbilt's name precedes itself as one of the top universities in the country and attracts some of the most talented individuals from around the world, leading me to my second point. The people are at the heart of what makes Vanderbilt so special because they reflect everything Vanderbilt stands for. Our world-class faculty and students produce almost $1 billion of research every year. Ultimately, you may have thought most literally of our wealth. Our nearly $11 billion endowment is what enables Vanderbilt's academic excellence and unparalleled student experience. Reputation, people, endowment. Today, we will make the case that our involvement with the fossil fuel industry imminently harms all three of these things that make Vanderbilt what it is. Now I will hand it off to my good friend Zahra to tell you more about our reputation.
Harvard University recently made headlines around the world when it announced that it would divest its $50 billion endowment away from fossil fuels. Over 1,300 academic and nonprofit institutions, including nearly all of our competitors in the top 15, have already committed to start divesting from fossil fuels. Vanderbilt has also been rated 30 out of 38 top universities in the US in terms of progress in sustainability, behind our competitors like Duke University. My name is ZAHRA BIABANI, and I am a senior with vast experience in climate education through my various social media platforms that are specifically geared towards young Gen Zers. I'm very in touch with the population of high school and college-age students, and I can speak to the reputational argument for divestment. Young people and future generations will be the most impacted by the consequences of climate change that are brought upon by fossil fuels. Young people in increasing numbers are making decisions based on environmental issues, one of which is where to go to college. A Princeton Review study showed that 78% of surveyed college applicants said that information about a university's environmental commitments would affect their decision to apply, which is up 12% from the previous year. Vanderbilt students are also clearly making these strong commitments to the environment and expecting the school to align with these, as indicated by the 3 existing programs in environmental studies and the new major in climate science. Through its partnership with Climate Vault, commitments to carbon reduction, and broader initiatives set by Future VU, Vanderbilt has shown that it's attuned to the risk of not taking meaningful climate action. Clearly, there is a reputational risk associated with not divesting and being one of the last top institutions to act on this issue, especially since we have a history of divesting as recently as 2013. The question becomes not why divest, but rather why aren't we divesting? Now I'll hand it over to Connor to talk about how fossil fuels hurt the very people that make up the Vanderbilt community.
Hi, my name is Connor Wormuth, and I'm a Divest exec member. Now, we'd like to talk about how fossil fuels hurt the people in our community. As I'm sure you're aware, all members of the Vanderbilt and broader Nashville community were threatened when Waverly, Tennessee was hit by a flash flood that led to 22 confirmed dead and several people trapped, including Vanderbilt professor Summer Ali. Floods of this magnitude, which are intensified by climate change, will only continue to threaten Tennesseans who make our communities what it is. Vanderbilt professor Dr. Janie Camp spoke on the relationship between the Waverly flood and climate change in a Washington Post article, where she discussed how the decisions of today will impact the Tennessee community in the future. More than just floods, Dr. Carol Ziegler also recently presented on how climate change may cause a spike in deadly heat waves in Nashville, specifically by 2050. Climate change is also a justice issue. It is no secret that Black and Brown communities suffer disproportionately from the effects of climate change, and that not all communities suffer in the same way. In an online forum with Professor Patrick Greiner, BIPOC students from various geographies spoke to how climate change is presently negatively impacting their families, especially in communities of color. From rising sea levels in Miami to loss of land in the Pacific Islands to changes to mass ecosystem changes that affect the functioning of indigenous communities to increase susceptibility to COVID-19 resulting from pollution, students expressed how climate change is injustice and resulting in erosion and loss of identity, functioning, and safety. So what can we do to protect Vanderbilt families? International agencies agree that in order to limit the worst consequences, we must stop the flow of capital to fossil fuel companies who continue to explore for new fossil fuels. Despite this consensus, Vanderbilt continues to contribute its wealth to polluters who are directly causing adverse outcomes for millions, both abroad and at home. Climate change is just one aspect of what prevents Indigenous and marginalized communities from being empowered to exit difficult cycles such as poverty. Unless we stop investing in fossil fuels, we will not be able to stop the already occurring irreversible climate change harm to Vanderbilt community members. I'll now hand it over to Josh Doe to talk more about the endowment.
All right, so now we'll discuss how fossil fuels devalue our endowment. But before, I thought it'd be helpful if I introduce myself and quickly discuss my background. For those who don't know me, my name's Josh, currently the president of Spear, and last summer, I worked at a company called Common Fund, a firm that helps colleges and nonprofit institutions like Vanderbilt invest their money. Specifically, I was on a team responsible for both oil and gas and sustainability private equity investments. As you may all know, our university endowment's role is to provide a permanent, long-term source of capital to financially support all the amazing things the Vanderbilt community does. Currently, Vanderbilt's endowment sits at around $11 billion. And as you can see, around 4% of the endowment is currently invested in a category called natural resources, which includes oil and gas production assets. Although only 4% of our portfolio, the natural resources category is still a staggering $500 million. And because it represents primary investment, it's this part of the endowment that we would especially love to see divested. Now, some of you may have seen the large returns from this year and may be wondering, why should we change anything? Well, let's break it down. It turns out nearly all top universities, including divesting peer institutions, had extremely strong returns last year due to favorable market conditions. In addition, this year's returns may be higher due to the disappointing losses from the year before, as you can see in the red category. Nevertheless, of the various asset classes in Vanderbilt's endowment, how did the natural resource category actually perform? Well, it turns out of the $4 billion in value added, only 4.9% of those gains came from the natural resource class. This clearly shows that Vanderbilt's strong performance was not due to the natural resource category. So now that we've discussed Vanderbilt's endowment, let's discuss further the fossil fuel asset class. Regardless of the reputational risk and the risk to our community, we point to the significant evidence that show fossil fuels are objectively bad investments. Starting with private equity, oil and gas funds have been among the lowest yielding asset classes in the past decade and have underperformed comparable buyout firms. Similarly, on the public equity side, the S&P energy sector has been a drag on the broader market and is one of the only sectors to have negative annual returns in a historically amazing market. So what about the portfolio diversification benefits of fossil fuels? Multiple research studies have shown that divestment does not negatively impact a portfolio's diversification or flexibility. And research from large asset managers like BlackRock have shown that divested funds' performance either match or outperform non-divested funds. This clearly shows that divestment does not violate fiduciary responsibility in any meaningful way, nor suggest that our endowment would be conceding any aspect of investment performance that's mandated by our university. So some may argue that the asset class might rebound in the upcoming years. And we're not going to claim that we know how the future will play out, but there are significant signs that show it's not looking good. First, countless institutions are divesting from fossil fuels and have already significantly reduced the amount of capital in the industry. According to the Global Fossil Fuel Divestment Database, approximately $39.2 trillion in assets under management have publicly committed to at least some form of divestment. Even if we estimate that 5% was previously invested in fossil fuels, the total amount committed to divesting is significant and a serious threat to the future of the industry. In addition, both governments and large institutional asset managers are ramping up their policies to accelerate the energy transition and pathway towards net zero, which will only continue to increase the pressure and risk for fossil fuel companies. Once again, we can ask the fundamental question of why we should stay invested in fossil fuels. Before I hand it off to Aditi, I wanted to mention that without Vanderbilt's generous financial aid policies, I would not be able to be here today. As I look forward to my graduation and reflect on my time here, one thing I know for certain is that I want other students to have the same opportunities as myself and be able to afford Vanderbilt. The ability to support and grow the university's financial aid budget is one of the main reasons I personally would like Vanderbilt to divest. Remaining in fossil fuels makes me feel uncomfortable for the next generation of economically disadvantaged students who seek to attend Vanderbilt. And considering the evidence provided, I ask the faculty to weigh the risk of remaining in this industry. Thank you. Now I'll hand it off to Aditi.
Hi, my name is Aditi and I'm an executive divestment member. And once again, I'd like to begin by returning to Chancellor Diermeier's statement, which calls for Vanderbilt to debate between the choice of divestment or shareholder activism, which we would like to address today. For those who might be unaware, some, like Chancellor Diermeier, have argued that continued investment in fossil fuel companies allows institutions like Vanderbilt to gain authority as a shareholder to influence the fossil fuel industry's behavior. However, as Vice President Al Gore has pointed out clearly, Vanderbilt has not once introduced a resolution or voted in a fossil fuel proxy vote. This is because Vanderbilt is not structured to participate in shareholder activism. All of Vanderbilt's fossil fuel holdings are managed by external investment managers who invest in and communicate with the fossil fuel companies on behalf of Vanderbilt. Thus, Vanderbilt cannot directly engage in shareholder activism. So, if shareholder activism is not a viable option for our university, what is our solution? We believe it's divestment. Researchers at the University of Cambridge have estimated that the global divestment movement has already raised the cost of capital for fossil fuel companies, which negatively impacts the industry's ability to raise new capital and finance their operations. In addition, companies like Shell itself have admitted that if divestment were to continue and the share price were to further drop, they would not be able to raise new financing and support their operations. So, when considering that we cannot engage in shareholder activism, and there are clear signs that divestment has shown some merit, we believe that divestment is the clear choice for solutions that will move us forward. Here is the divestment resolution that we request the Student Life Committee to submit for a vote. This is the language that has been used by our peer universities such as Harvard and their faculty votes as well. We have sent both a Word document and a PDF file with the full motion for the faculty senators to edit.
Thanks so much, Aditi. In conclusion, we have made today a compelling case that fossil fuels hurt our reputation, our people, and our endowment. As you can see by the faculty in attendance here today, we've achieved a critical mass of interest from professors. So regardless of whether you personally support the merits of our case, we'll hope you will agree that this body has an imperative to fully consider our motion on the floor of the Faculty Senate this January. To end on a positive note, I just want to reiterate how much your input really matters. In 2016, Cornell's Board of Trust rejected fossil fuel divestment, citing the lack of faculty input on the matter. In 2021, just 1 month after the Faculty Assembly voted to support the movement, Cornell said okay and canceled its fossil fuel investments. This is your chance. Please join us in allowing this issue to be debated come January. We'll now like to allow a moment for questions and comments from voting faculty senators first before we open to the whole group. Dr. Hare?